Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Good morning, everybody. Let me introduce myself first. I am Athia from SMERU YouTube. I welcome you all to SMERU this morning. We thank you for your participation in this event. Today we will, in cooperation with OECD and NASM from the University of Canberra, we will launch two reports. The first one is a global report on equality with the title "Divided We Stand, Why Inequality Keeps Rising." In the seminar package, we only distribute the overview of that report. But I think if you are interested to get the whole copy, you can find a web address at the back of the overview, and you can download it from there. This report will be presented by Micheal from OECD. The second report that we will launch still on related theme on poverty and equality. The title is Trends in Poverty and Equality in Decentralising Indonesia. Written by Riyana, Merianti, and Alatas from NASM in University of Canberra. Riyana, or we only call Mira, will present the second report. After the presentation, we will have discussions by two discussions. The first one is Priebe from Canberra, and the second discussion will be our own Athia, Yumna. We feel very honored to become the host of this launching. This is actually our second time become the host of launching of OECD report. The first one was in 2010 when OECD launched the Going for Growth report. So the first thing, before we move on with the presentation and discussion, I would like to thank the speakers today. The first one is Micheal. Let me read Micheal's biodata first. Micheal is a senior analyst at the OECD Social Policy Division, and he has been working in different departments at the OECD Directorate for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs since 1986. Mr. Foster's research interest and expertise focus on international comparative social policy analysis, in particular in the areas of income distribution, poverty, impact of tax, benefit policies, and selected areas of social policy reform. Micheal holds a PhD in economics from the University of Leiden in Belgium. The second presenter, Dr. Riyana Merianti, or Mira, is a senior research fellow at NASM. NASM is the National Center for Social and Economic Modeling at the University of Canberra. Mira has a strong research interest and experience in areas that focus on well-being and disadvantages, investigating issues of poverty and inequality for Australian communities and social exclusion affecting various population groups in Australia, including children, older people, and immigrants to Australia. But Mira also has been continuously researching issues related to economic development in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. Expanding her thesis which focus on patterns and determinants of regional poverty in Indonesia. Mira holds a PhD in economics from the Australian National University. Our first discussion, Jan Priebe. Our first discussion, Jan Priebe, currently works at AP2K, the national team for accelerating and expanding poverty reduction. That's right. Currently, Jan works to assist in coordinating and reforming Indonesia's social assistance policies that target poor and vulnerable groups in Indonesia. Previously, Jan has worked for OECD, for DFID, GIZ, KFW, World Bank, and UNICEF. And Jan has a PhD in economics and a Part1 from the University of Göttingen in Germany. The second discussion is our own Athia Yumna. Athia is a senior researcher at SMERU. Currently, Athia has become our health economic specialist, but she has done many other research related to poverty and social protection in Indonesia. And Athia holds an MSc in economics from the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. I have just received a note that our third discussion, Vivi Alatas, will join us later. I will introduce her later when she did arrive. So I think that's my introduction of the speakers and discussion for today's event. I also would like to thank you all, the participants who have made the effort to come and join our event today. We see that there are representatives from the government here, from the academic community, and also from the donor community, well represented here. We hope that you all will be engaged in the discussion today and give constructive and productive comments. So we will have a lively event today. So I think let's start with the first session today with a presentation by Micheal on the first report on divided distance, why inequality keeps rising. Micheal, thanks. Yeah.
Perhaps easier if I stand up so that I can see all of you. We are ahead of schedule, which is good. I would first like to thank, like I said, SMERU for making this possible. We just recently, already 4 or 5 years ago, started privileged key partnerships with emerging economies, including Indonesia. And of course, the key economic issues were debates at the first start a couple of years ago. But what is important is to link this also to social policy issues and issues of income distribution and poverty, which is what my department deals with. And the second thanks then go to Riyana and Merianti, with whom together we produced a report on trends in inequality and poverty in Indonesia during the recent. I can also talk up louder if you. Do you hear me? Will the micro is better? Okay,
Yes.
so I'm streaming. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah, fine.
okay. So Riyana, with her team, will use this report, and I think this report should be the center of today's debate. So my role here is rather to talk about the OECD context. I will keep this rather short, and to give you a flavor of how we approach the issue among our 34 member countries, which are, by the way, here, their heads. And then part of the issues which are relevant also for emerging economies, including Indonesia, and then in the second stage, I think Micheal will present the key report, which should be the center, the focus of the debate today. So thanks again, Dr. Secretary, for contributions. Let me just put up 3 quotes why the issue of increasing inequality has become something more than a social policy concern over the last years. And actually, prior to the economic crisis in OECD countries in 2008, by our chief economist, by our Secretary General, and also by the US President, which means that a high level of disparities in an economy, in a society, has also economic consequences which are worrisome to some extent. And this is just the quotes. The left hand is the report we published 3 years ago, just probably today, and which is not the first report. OECD has been working on issues of income distribution and poverty since many, many years. But the first landmark report was called Growing Unequal. By the way, Growing for Both, that was presented here 2 or 3 years ago, and Growing Unequal are 2 strands of the same debate, in a way. This was 2008. In 2011 we got this step, and currently we're working on the next strand of reports. Now, and this is also what I will shortly talk about this morning, in the next 20 minutes or so. First of all, on the trends. In OECD countries, how have inequalities developed over the last 20, 30 years? Second, the causes. What are the major underlying driving forces for increases in disparities? And third, which are possible remedies? Which policies are most promising to reduce increasing disparities? Let me start first by a picture of the level of income disparities in the 34 member countries, which is the left-hand panel. And what is shown here is that there are huge differences in levels of income disparity. What is traced here is the so-called Gini coefficient, which is 0 when everybody has the same income, and which is 1 when the richest person has all the income. And as you can see, this varies from a low of 0.25 up to 0.50, from simple to double, in OECD member countries, in 34 countries. You can group the OECD region with regard to the level of disparities in perhaps 5 groups. So you have a group which equal distribution, which is most of the smaller European countries, the Nordic countries, but also Belgium, Luxembourg, and some of the Central European countries, Czech Republic, Hungary, or my own country, which is Austria. Then you have 2 groups of countries around the average, which are more of the bigger European countries, France, Poland, Germany, but also including upper and southern European countries. Then inequalities are higher in countries like Israel, United States, and Turkey, and highest in our 2 member states from the Latin American continent, Chile and Mexico. If you express this perhaps in a ratio of the income of the richest 10% to the poorest 10%,
On OECD average, this is 9 to 1. So the income of the richest 10% are 9 times higher than the income of the poorest 10%. And this goes from, as you can see, 6 to 1 in the Nordic countries and some European countries, up to almost 30 to 1. Now, I plotted here what is available on the both emerging countries. I plotted it separately because the definitions are different, because the surveys are different, but it gives you an idea of the order of magnitude. And in all emerging countries, for the time being, late 2010, the level of disparities is higher than the OECD average, but varying degrees. So it is around 0.4 in India and Indonesia, and goes up to almost 0.7 in South Africa. Still, in OECD context, what we're using is household disposable incomes, which are corrected for household size, so-called pluralized incomes. The definitions are quite different in the more emerging economies. It's usually used per capita concept. And secondly, in the two countries, India and Indonesia, you use consumption or consumption expenditure and not income, and in the other countries you use income. And if you use different definitions, this can of course give rise to very different estimates. If you look at Indonesia, what I found is estimates going from as low as 0.21 to as high as 0.55, depending whether you use consumption, equivalized or not, income, total income, which includes income in kind, this one here, income in kind and on consumption, or if you use only cash income. So it is very important to look at the definition. But this gives you just an order of magnitude of the level of disparities in OECD countries and emerging economies. What was the long-term trend? Well, in 4 out of 5 OECD countries in the last 30 years, it was upwards. But this was different according to the region and the country. So inequality starts rising first in Anglo-Saxon countries in the 1980s, early 1980s, late 1970s. So this one is come from the US, which has one of the highest provisions in the OECD context. This is the UK, where you can see that most of the increase happened in the late 70s up to the 90s. And this is the OECD average. So it's a slowly but significant increasing curve from Gini provision of around 0.28 to around 32 in 2010. Here are two continental European countries, Germany and France. France was actually one of the exceptions until the mid-2000s, in that income inequality was rather on a decreasing trend, which has to do with some government policies. In Germany, the big upsurge happened in the 2000s, and since then they have the same level of income inequality. It surged up again in France 2 years after the economic crisis, and in Germany it remained rather flat. An interesting case in itself are the Nordic countries, because the Nordic is the Nordic countries still have one of the lowest levels of income disparity worldwide, but relatively speaking, on a very, very rapid upward trend, especially Sweden. Sweden is, if you take it in relative terms, is the country where income inequality increased the most in OECD countries. But this is of course because Sweden started at a very low level, around 2020 in the 90s, and is now approaching the OECD average. So if this continues this trend, Sweden will no longer be a showcase for an equal society in OECD countries, but just a rich country, like Germany and France. Now, why do we care about these increasing trends? Of course, there are ethical concerns, there are political concerns, there are moral concerns, but there are also economic concerns. And one of the economic concerns is about equality of opportunities and social mobility. Because this is actually disparities, it's not only the outcomes that are here today, but also whether a high disparity of distribution of resources can hinder social mobility. That's the chart suggests that this is the case. So what we have here is an indicator of social mobility, meaning to which extent do children have different earnings than their parents. So the higher the value, the higher social mobility. And the lower the value, the more it is likely that children have the same income than their parents. And here is the Gini coefficient that I just shown before. And actually, there's a little bit of an association. So countries which have a high level of inequality today, like US, Italy, United Kingdom, also have low social mobility. Social mobility in the US is much lower, despite what many myth are saying, than in the Nordic countries, for instance, where you have low inequality today, but also higher social mobility tomorrow. Of course, there are a lot of countries which do not really fit this trend. For instance, France, and this has something to do with the education system, had a relatively low inequality, but relatively low mobility too. So the point here to make is just that the long-term effects of widening inequality can actually be scary because they accumulate over time. And that's a reason for worrying. Now, this is just a summary of the key slide aspects of the trend. So it sets some countries inequality is increased in the whole OECD region. The exceptions are, as I just mentioned, France to some extent over some period, but also some countries where there were high inequalities to start with. Mexico, Chile, Turkey. So this means that there was some convergence of inequality over time because OECD countries, but to a higher level, as I have shown from point 28 to point 32 over the last 25 years. The second important finding is that income disparities increased during both recessions and boom periods. And they increased during periods of employment growth in the 2000s, before the crisis 2007-2008, which of course begs the question why. And thirdly, in many countries, the inequalities especially increased at the top of the distribution. And that's the point I want to make in the next slide, on the upper end of the income distribution. If you look only at the top 1%, so which share of the total income goes to the top 1%, this has increased in many countries, and in some of the countries, it even doubled. So for instance, in the US, this is from 1980, but from 1970 it more than doubled. And this concerns many of the English-speaking countries, so in US, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Ireland, where the share of the income going to the top 1% increased considerably. It also happened in some of the Nordic countries, again, from a lower level. We have some data on Indonesia here, which I probably can from a study of annual day. But the thing is that there was an increasing trend at the very top. And this trend, of course, depends on the structural cycles, much more than for the overall distribution. And it also can, because the data in some countries are more up to date, so it can tell us something about the post-crisis development. If you look, for instance, so this is the for the US. And here you can see in 2007, 8 to 9, there was a fall in the top 1% because the capital incomes plunged in a way following the crisis. But this happened only during in 2 years. Afterwards, it went up again, which actually was higher now than it has been ever before. So the share of top incomes is 20%. The share just going to the richest 1%, in the US is 20%, which is a lot. And this actually, you can see this is a response to policy reform. Because here, Obama announced that the tax exemptions will come to an end in 2014. In 2013. So in 2012, there was a move to realize capital gains. So top income shares are influenced both by the economic cycles, but also by policy parameters. This is the point we're getting here. For Indonesia, and here open your comments here, what I found is a surge in the late 90s up to 2002 and 2004, which we can discuss later. Now, what's important when you look at this top of income distribution is also the perceptions. Because here I have just shown the shares of the top 1% going up. But if you look at overall long-term growth, so the growth between 1976 up to the price of 2007, and which part of this overall growth has been captured by the top 1%. Well, in most European countries, something like 10%. So the top 1% is the yellow, and the two blue together are what is often called, I put it under quotes because the bottom 99%, which is the large majority of the population. But in European countries, something like 10% of the overall growth over the last almost 30 years, has been captured by the top 1%. Now, this goes up to 20% in countries like New Zealand, Australia, and UK. It goes up to 47% in the US. Or, let's put it otherwise. Let's compare, for instance, France and the US. In the US, the annual growth rate of real income was 1% over this period. 1% real income increase for 30 years, right? Long term. But in France, it was 0.7%. So in France, according to this indicator, you could argue that the performance in France was outperformed by the US. Because in the US, on average 1% growth per year, France 0.7%. But let's look at the bottom 99%. What was the increase in the yearly increase in real income for the large majority of the population? Well, it was 0.6% in the US. 0.6%. Not 1%, 0.6%. And it was 0.65% in France. So the perception of how economic growth is perceived by the large majority of the population, of course, depends on its distribution. Okay. Oops. So the second part, we'll try to resume the evidence on the main drivers in perhaps 20 minutes. Of course, if you look at what is driving this increase in income disparities, if you look at the usual suspects, globalization. I mean, this is, of course, trade globalization now these days, the World Trade Organization, Ministerial meeting, which is an important issue, because so has globalization triggered inequality in OECD countries. We looked at regulations, we looked at many things. Now, I would really resume this very shortly, not going into detail, but we did not find the direct effect of globalization in terms of trade or foreign direct investment on income distribution, neither positive nor negative. It was neutral. Once you control for changes in regulations, in institutions, in other variables, then the effect of globalization was neutral, both in terms of inequality and employment, by the way, for OECD countries. Second, well, and then of course it was the second question, well, in that case perhaps the changing regulations, the deregulation in OECD countries might have been effective. Also institutions, weaker trade unions, etc. Deregulations and influence of product markets, but also in terms of labor markets. Well, the effects were ambiguous. What do I mean by that? Yes, the deregulation, the trend of deregulation in product and labor markets, and the weakening of institutions has increased wage disparities in OECD countries. But at the same time, we have increased employment. And we put these two together, and when we put it together, then actually the effect is near to a two. When you look at both the distribution of wages among persons who are working and the effect on how many people are working. Okay. Thirdly, well, then comes the argument where perhaps changing demography can play a role. More people becoming old in OECD countries, more people living alone, but also more people living together with the same characteristics. Or what we call associative mating, so more people on the same background, with the same education, rich people living with rich people, poor people living with poor people. Well, it's had a little bit of an impact, but it was not the main driver. So what are the main purposes? Well, first of all, technological changes, insofar as they can be disentangled from the overall organization issue. But the increase in skill-wise technological elements made the disparity between high and low skilled workers and medium skilled workers in most of our countries. Second, changes in employment patterns. These were very important. Employment labor market patterns change. In OECD countries, this meant an increase during the growth period, before the crisis, an increase in non-standard work, atypical work, precarious work, temporary work, etc. This had a lot of an impact on working conditions on the economic distribution. And thirdly, also very important, and a weaker redistribution. The tax and benefit system in OECD countries is a very important one. I will show this in the next slide, but it became less effective already in 1990s and 2000s, which had then, of course, an impact how you could answer the prices. And then, as also good news, in all countries, the effect of increasing education levels, higher human capital, upskilling of the workforce, however you call it, has offset much of the drive towards income inequality, which comes from the labor market and from technological change. So in a way, the very old story by the Dutch economist Merianti, which called the outcome of distribution, a race between technology and human capital education, is a little bit confirmed by these results. Now, I want to talk about the redistribution because this plays a very important role in OECD countries. If you look at the distribution of income before taxes and transfers are set in, this is the upper figures, or here the average is 943, I think, 42. And then, when you add all the taxation, all the cash transfers, the inequality goes down by a quarter. 25% to the level we've seen before, and in some countries, especially European countries, Belgium, France, Finland, Austria, this is a very, the tax benefit system is a very strong redistributive problem. Now we know in emerging countries that the reward is much, much lower. But also in some of the OECD countries, if you look at Korea or Chile, the same would be for Mexico, by the way, which is on topic here, the impact of the public tax transfer system is much lower. And this has a role to play. Because both taxation and spending is important to redistribute market income. Let's just have a look at the relation between the level of spending, social spending, in an economy, expressed as how much you spend from your issues, public issues, and poverty rates. If you look at the left panel, which is the OECD countries, you have a relative definition of poverty, the number of people below half of the median income, which is here. And here's the social protection expenditures, which does not include health transportation. No, sorry, which does not include health, but not education. And there's a strong relationship that the higher social spending is, the lower is the poverty rate. But this is also true for the sector of Asia Pacific countries. Here there's an absolute definition of poverty that I worked at, below $2 a day. And also here you can see the countries which spend more on social issues as a percentage of their GDP and lower poverty rates. So there is some relation here. But the point is, this redistributive strength in OECD countries went down. And it went down since the mid-1990s, you see? And it only became a little bit stronger during the crisis. Of course, because it is economic stabilizers, more people take unemployment benefits of the system, that became a bit stronger. But the point is, if at the onset of the crisis, 2007, if we had the same level of redistribution as we had 15 years ago, in the mid-1990s, many thousands, even millions of households would have been impacted less by the financial crisis, economic crisis in 2007 than they had been. This is very important that this reduction in redistributive strength and power was perhaps not a very good omen for the crisis shape that they were in 2007. This was the question on the benefit side. This is the tax side, and this is one indicator, which is the change in the total personal income tax rate. There was a declining trend in all OECD countries, from the average from close to 70 to now 40%. This is the country with the highest, the country with the lowest, much total income tax rate. And this is not only income tax rate. Corporate taxes, wage taxes, property, any taxes which impact on top incomes went down since the 1980s. And of course, this has an effect for the system. Now, just 2 words on the trends since 2007-2008, when the price shifted to the economics. Now, the first 2 to 3 years, until 2010, what we have observed, there was no significant increase in net income inequality. Why? Because the welfare state has prevented income inequality from from bad to worse in this first phase. But of course, in the second phase, after 2012, as many people exhausted their rights to benefits, and as the jobs crisis is persisting, there are not enough jobs being created. And thirdly, is the consolidation takes place. For instance, the further increasing both inequalities and poverty in OECD. And just the last slide, just to show that even in our countries, those who were more touched by the effects were youth and children. So this is the overall trend in poverty rates, 2.7%. This is for children, which is higher, and this is for youth. So the main issue that we face today, in most of OECD countries, is youth. Because if you don't get a job now, and this will impact on your career, and of course increasing both job and poverty risks. And it's a very important policy issue. I will resume now some more general lessons from the whole work, both rounds of work that we did on foreign and equal and like to stand. And actually, the bottom line is both redistribution and employment policies matter. We need both to reduce income disparities. And there are three main avenues to achieve this. The most direct one is the first one, which is looking at tax benefits, performing tax, and this can be made more distributed. This concerns both transfers, taxes transfers, insofar as they, as I have shown, they have an important role to play to safeguard the incomes of royal customers. But there's also a role to play for changing tax provisions, because as we have seen, the tax capacity of top income earners, even during the crisis, gets increased. Second big trend, and this is perhaps it's going beyond, and it's important to link, because just remaining with this short-term redistributive changes is not enough. What we need is to also look at policy which boost employment and career prospects. So it's not a matter of, I think many governments and also the OECD went to show in the 1990s and 2000s. It's not a matter of creating more jobs, it's a matter of creating more and better jobs. First, 2000 had a lot of job creation and most incomes, but as I mentioned, all of them, not all, but a lot of them, were atypical, non-standard, and sometimes various works. And the point is to create more and better jobs. And finally, the results this is shown that it's a key to continue investing in human capital and promote upskilling of the workers. In that, fighting against segmentation. Its education must be open to age to make equal opportunities. So these are the nutshell, the three policy avenues that the OECD is proposing. And I stop here. Well, 25 minutes. Yeah, because you're invited to my room to ask for a point.
Thank you, Micheal, for very interesting and informative presentation. I think the main message is that increasing inequality is a global phenomenon. It occurs in many countries, and there are many factors behind it. Social change, changes in formulation, but also policies, particular tax and transfer policies matter very much for economic inequality. We will now continue with Mira's presentation, focusing on Indonesia. But before we start, I see there are some people on the faraway side. There are still some empty places on the left side here, so I think you can move. This time.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to SMERU to attend this event. I would like to thank Pak Athia from SMERU and also Micheal from OECD and also the Discussants, Vivi, Riyana, and also Athia. I'm really delighted to be here and then to see that this event is actually happening. So, as Pak Athia already introduced, my name is Yumna. I work for National Center for Social and Economic Modeling, based in Canberra. And then, we have been actually working on this report for probably around a year. So, involving a bit of discussion as well. I think actually extensive discussion with the OECD part and others as well. So So before we start, I think I'd just like to quote like this about relationship between poverty and equality, particularly from the one I quoted here from Jenny Sachs, is that the key planning and extreme poverty is never towards the two together to find the data of the So, like, I mean, poverty and equality is actually really good. So I just would like to acknowledge people that they contribute to the paper as well. So Micheal and also colleague Anna and from OECD. And then a couple of OECD delegates that gave really, really valuable feedback, particularly when I presented the preliminary findings of the report in Paris last year. And then we had also this research reference group of Athia, Sony from Demographic Institute, MDR team from Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, and again, actually from UK. And then my acknowledgement also goes to my co-authors that unfortunately are not here today. So this is the map framework, so you have to see what's happening with decentralization. I'll just like read it. What is the context? To provide the context of this decentralization into the report, and then discuss about the poverty and equality trends in Indonesia, and then the new estimate of poverty and the quality elasticity of poverty, and then discuss touch a bit about government strategies, and then summarize and then what are actually lessons from policy. So decentralization in Indonesia. So I think we all know this was a big bang decentralization, but it's actually never actually been set up into with the sole objective to eradicate poverty, but actually it's provide a really important context for poverty and equality discussion, because there is an expectation by the time that there is a transfer for responsibility from the central government to the local government, such as to improve service delivery and provide them access to the poor. I think also during the centralization period or after the crisis, and we have the reforms, we have the reforms here that I think is the role because society is becoming much very strong, and then can give feedback about what's happening to the development process. I think that is the one line with decentralization is also that really provide crucial context in the poverty and equality discussion. So I just moved to the poverty and equality trends, but before I will just touch a little bit on macro indicators. So this table shows you what happened during the different periods of development. So like the prior to the crisis, covering 1919, 1996, and then the crisis period 1997, 1998, the recovery period, which is around 1999, 2002, and then we divided out back the decentralization period, early stage decentralization, covering 2004, and full implementation of 2005, 2010. Why I did this? I think it's because the law the application of the law in the I think in 2004. So we try to differentiate the periods. But yeah, what we can see from the table, I think, is that what happened is economic growth is actually lower during the centralization period comparing to the prior to the economic crisis in 1996, like from 7.2% per year is around like 5% during the centralization period. The other thing that's really interesting is agricultural sector GDP actually grew relatively stable prior to the crisis, but whilst the service sector grew the strongest compared to other sectors after the crisis. And then this has been translated into the growth and shares in the private sectors as well. So if you look, this is the same thing, but in different growth episodes, but then we differentiate into that different sector. And then we can actually see that service sector, so you see as if you see here, so the service sector actually grew the strongest. And then during the entire decentralization period. Like the service sector is now accounting for like 39% of the total employment. So I think Micheal has already touched a little here about the comparison Indonesia versus the emerging economies. And I put here a little bit also about comparison to Asian countries where Indonesia is a member. And then if you look Indonesia here, I think in terms of inequality, keeping in mind there's a differences in terms of whether income, consumption, or expenditure used as the base to calculate inequality. Among the countries that show the chart here, Indonesia is like the third after South Africa and also Brazil in terms of the Gini index. But I think in terms of the poverty rates here, this is by under $2 GDP per day, and then this one is 1 to 5 GDP per day. So what happened in terms of the trends of property across the time? So this is the official Discussants data. There are three things that I have summarized on the table. So the outcome of the rate, as you see, it has been actually increasing over the time. But then if you compare like prior to the crisis and after the crisis, actually there now is more regional decline in the poverty rate to the transition period. Comparing to the crisis. So you can see like this is like steep decline, but then it's more regional. This actually makes sense because it starts from really high, then but now it's like, I think across the time like this is actually lower, then it will be like within the same reasons of the decline. And then the other thing is like there's but still the gap between urban or urban is still there as well. Actually, rural poverty rate is higher than urban. And then I'm really interested like regional disparities as well. So put here some slides about regional disparities in the poverty. So this is at the provincial level. So this is the latest data when we did actually our report. So at the provincial level. So you can see here we divided provinces based on the classification of, or you can see the darkest color on the map shows you that like the highest poverty rates. So this is based on the natural rates classification, where the classification based on like jump in the data. So you can see that like provinces like Papua, and then like East Tenggara, West Tenggara. So this is like the classic stories that they have really high poverty rates. But then if you see like Jakarta and Bali, so this is classified as having a low poverty rates. But then if you compare to the number of the poor, it's actually because most people are concentrated in Java, then the number of poor actually concentrated in Java as well. So you can see like the dark color section here. So it is, gives you like a different kind of like stories like if you look at the rates and you look at the number. And then also to like try to compare the poverty rates in 2001 and compared to 2010. So this is based on the distance from the mean, so like plus minus the standard deviation. And then we categorize the provincial poverty rate as low, medium, high. So this is like the change between 2001 and 2010. And then what we see is essentially arterial. So what happened in 2001, classification 0.5%. So only one that's probably, if you talk about an improvement, say for example from medium moving to the low category. So we only actually see one. So in the South Carolina province. So the story about the property is still the same, I think, like during the 10 years period. Then the changes, so we talk about the property rates, we talk about the goal, obviously we talk about analyzed change in property rates between 2001 and 2010. What is it? Because I just went on the conferences like from the really which experience the most rapid reduction in terms of property rates. Which is interesting that Jakarta is actually experiencing increase in property rates. So it's unchecked. And then what we see here is like Banten and Jambi experience the most rapid decline in property rates by almost 9%. And then while I think Indonesia is like less than 4% on average. What's really interesting is for West Nusa Tenggara and East Nusa Tenggara, for example, which is like start at the really high property rates, for example. I think there is an indication of catching up phenomenon that they experience like relatively a little bit higher decline in terms of property rates in comparison to the average in Indonesia. And then I remember, I think last time when we AU or they also like organized Indonesian update, I think this phenomenon about catching up from the high property rate provinces experience rapid decline in property rates, I think also is something. And after discussing about property, I would like to discuss about the trends in commodities. This is also using Gini coefficient published by TPS. So while the pattern in terms of the property rates declining over the time, rising inequality actually observed over the last decade. And then the rural gap, but now it's rural inequality lower than urban inequality. I think probably are affecting the large increases in urban population in recent years. Then we move from the national back to the spatial level. This is a Professor Gini coefficient. So what is really interesting is like Papua, which is having a high poverty rates, also have a high inequality as well. So same thing for Banten, and also the other one is Gorontalo. I think categorized as the highest in the highest inequality category. I think this is because this is the provinces, but then Gorontalo, this is often with the discussion as well, whether it's like the provinces that becoming provinces after decentralization tend to have higher inequality factor. Then this is the change in Gini coefficient, the annualized change between 2001 and 2010. And as we can see here, it's really, it's actually the change is positive. So across the time, actually inequality increased, which is confirmed from the provincial pictures as well. Even for example, Papua here is like having categorized as the lowest change, but still, I mean, like it's already very high. That's actually really changed much. And then to give you more ideas, more picture about the implicit inequality, so I have a table here showing the consumption share held by the population, and then I just would like to draw your attention probably for the consumption share held by the highest 10% and consumption share held by the lowest 20%. So what's really interesting is like, across the time, like something like this is just before the crisis, consumption share held by the highest 10% is actually increased from 27%, and then now it's something this is like 2009 is 34.1%, while the consumption share held by the lowest 20% from 9% actually declined to 7.4%. So it's just the gap between the rich and the poor is actually wider. Then although we didn't test this empirically yet, but we try to like what is actually behind what are the drivers behind the increasing inequality, and then OECD report. I think they have a special section about the drivers, potential economic drivers for emerging economies, and then they cover the role, discuss about the role of labor market, the informal employment, the disparities, and also to the regional disparities as possible determinants of why inequality is increasing. And then we will examine them here. So the labor market, I think I just like some indicators. For example, in terms of earning average, the ratio of the average earnings of workers in 90th percentile to those 10th percentile of wages is around like 10 times or 10 times. Right? So this is the ratio of 2009, although it's just a little bit lower in terms of percentage point in 2010, but still, like the workers in the top, like in the 90th percentile is actually earning much more than the one like in the bottom. And then average year wages increased by about 3.7% per annum during this 10 years period, while actually manufacturing wages, which is considered as like another indicators of what actually the informal sector has been exhibited at a declining trend since 2005. And then still stable and high 70% of the population work in the informal sector, despite increasing growth in reality. Despite we have like 5% of growth, but we still have 70% of actually population who works in the formal sector. And then formal informality, I think that in the literature will have like an impact on inequality. And that I think Micheal already said it already, I mentioned earlier that inequality is actually a long-term increasing, and then we have impact on some other negative impacts on the generation of tax. And then there is a law of solution to the labor market. So I have both cited some statistics here. There is a job applicants assault in the formal sector is only around 38%, which is probably also like showing some indication of skill mismatch in the labor market. Then so that's from the labor market. Then I'll just touch a bit on the regional disparities, but this is this level. I have to thank Micheal from OECD, which provides actually this data from KPOD. So this is the data using the district level data from 2001 to 2007, the data is provided. So what we calculated here is the health index as an indicator of inequality. And then we compose the index into actually 3 parts. So the health index, our district profits, TWP, health index between provinces, the composition between region. So the region is what we apply here, like for example, Java, Bali, and then like Sumatra, Sulawesi, and so on. So what will happen is like, when we decompose this, for example, if we use this is gross regional domestic product. So across the year, from 2001 to 2007, the inequality actually has been declining. The regional disparities in terms of the RDP is actually declining. And then this is contributed the most by the declining in the regional disparities across districts within province. So the green color here. But the measurement methods, this is from the GDP. So this is in terms of poverty rates. So we combine poverty rates, and then we also calculate the health index, the regional disparities in terms of poverty rates. So what happened here? So the same thing. So actually, the inequality is in terms of the poverty rates, the regional disparity is actually increasing, particularly from 2001 until 2005. And then this also mostly contributed by this, the disparities across this rate within province. So I think it's I guess it's like one is the measurement of the methods, because when we look at the gross domestic regional product, I mean it's really declining, but on the poverty rate there's also an indication that regional disparity is actually increasing. And then this also again probably confirming that there is a lack correlation between the GRDP as what the region actually produces and what actually the welfare of the population in that area. Then after talking about inequality, so now this is actually the extension of my thesis and then one article that I'm publishing in GIS. So estimating the impact of consumption and growth inequality. So what was when we have really quite substantial growth, but then increasing inequality, what is actually happening to the economy? So economic growth increased from 5%, as I already mentioned, but mean consumption per capita only increased by 2.5%. Then this is, I have to mention that the growth here is a consumption growth, so both are using the data from equality and consumption growth. And then actually, we would like to examine the consumption growth elasticity of poverty during the fourth development period, which is the decentralization, again taking into account changes in poverty. Then the research question is like, has the decentralization period performed? To what degree has the change in the inequality offset and alleviated impact of growing consumption of property? Because economic growth was 3%, consumption per capita increase as well, but then what is the impact of the inequality to offset this increase of the consumption growth impact? So this is the estimation. So I combine the data which my long-term sales data that I had earlier. So what is really interesting is like the growth impact, consumption growth impact to the property is actually not so much during the first decentralization period of 1984, but increase with the decline during recovery and then up again during the decentralization period. This elasticity can be interpreted like 1% increase in the consumption growth actually have an impact to increase the poverty rate by 2.46%. So how that is interpreted. But this is on the other side, the inequality elasticity of poverty is interestingly also the highest during the decentralization period by 1.13. So 1% increase in inequality represents a Gini coefficient is actually increase the poverty rate by 1.93%. And then we actually try to quantify this contribution to the poverty change. So, the result from the elasticity is trying to recover the contribution to the poverty change. And then during the decentralization period, when the poverty changed between 2000 and 2010, like 5.71 percentage point contribution from the consumption growth is actually offset by the inequality change by 1.8%, 1.8 percentage point. So what we can say here is what we can see that's true that the mean consumption actually going up and then actually has an impact to reduce poverty. But what happened is like inequality increasing and offsetting the impact of the average consumption growth and then reducing the consumption growth impact. Okay, so after discussing about what's happening, poverty, inequality, I just would like to touch with some of the strategies, which is probably, you are the expert of this in terms of good policy. So I'll just discuss about these clusters of poverty reduction strategies. I think, as most of you know, I think we have three faster one basic needs of social protection, faster to economic empowerment, faster to microfinance, and then with all the programs under each cluster mentioned here. So just would like to discuss a bit about what is the good stories, what are probably like remaining issues, remaining challenges. So when the report is written, we only at that time the latest Susanna 2011, which has this consumption that has not been out yet. So we still use Susanna 2008 as the database that will becoming our basis of analysis in this section. So in terms of fasting, the good thing is that 80.5% of the household in the bottom income for fasting. Although if we see a distribution from the total recipient of fasting is only 50.4%. And then in terms of the social assistance measures, I think this is the biggest component of the social assistance budget, accounted for 44%. The remaining challenges, when we look at the data, I think although the higher the ceiling price, I think the ceiling price is I think also around 600. So, but I think they're still from the data, the ceiling product is still very higher than the ceiling price. And then housing is still, which is supposed to distribute it to the poor household, but because of this, there's a linkage and everything. Housing is still to be shared between more people in the poorer household, because poorer household tend to have more housing price. And then we start getting what we found is significant from the least disadvantaged quintiles. Like for example, 14.6% of farmers still be distributed for the fourth quintile. But I have to explain that actually this quintile is based on consumption expenditure quintiles. And there is also a discussion about challenges in terms of accessibility issues, particularly in remote areas. Then jumpers marks for health. So only 74% of individuals in the bottom quintile have jumpers marks, which is contributed 36% of the total recipients. And this is accounted on 70% of the social assistance budget in 2010. The remaining challenges in this cited from the World Bank study, like out-of-pocket costs and operational costs are still high. And sometimes, like lack of understanding, like the eligible participants actually lack of understanding about the program. There is also delays in this program, so like this program is actually underutilized. And then distance also matters, particularly when you live again, if you live in a remote area, accessibility becoming an issue. And then also like there are also certain sectors, for example. Like inadequate service provision, and then some also quoted about the perceived low service quality because this is attached to the development program. And then again, there is an issue with targeting education for the 5th quintiles. There's still low utilization of public hospital and polyclinic. And although boosters mask is still the most popular for individuals in the bottom quintile, there is when we look at the data, also just try to see what is also the outcomes of these things. Then a lot of our children are still not immunized at the bottom quintile, and then the population was really high. Education, we have both US and COM, charge for students from public and secondary school. And I think the positive things about this education is this has increased net enrollment rates in programs, particularly in primary and secondary schools. But the remaining challenge we found is transition from primary, still an issue with secondary school, particularly within like senior high school, disparities, regional disparities in terms of enrollment rates in senior high school is still an issue. And then I think alignment with the government district budget. There's some discussion in the literature about the fact that 20% has not been met. And then also there are supply side issues like the largest number of residential schools, and then regional disparities in terms education facilities. We use a number of primary schools or teachers can find some population. There's initial teacher absenteeism due to models of region. I think this is referred to the SMERU's works. Low incentive for some teachers, lack of monitoring and some teachers more. And family goal program of PKH. I think what the simple thing that we can see is like they have getting behavior shifts. I mean, looking at data, they have, for example, greater health facility usage by the poor. For example, increased birth assistance required and decline birth assistance by traditional assistance for those who are in the bottom quintile of the consumption or expenditure. And then I think according to best service and there is also an income effect, and then the short term for nutrition, education, for children, but long term also like improving intergenerational benefits. Again, I think there are many challenges still underutilized due to the complexity of the program and probably monitoring compliance is often based on like monitoring right now less the Athia, which is allowing communities to promote their own plans. I'm going to share some good stories about the program. For example, there's a program that tries to improving the distribution of loans to women. But again, I think the question is whether this is effective, more effective compared to the others. I think we actually observe a mixed impact. I would like to discuss with you more about this particular program. And microfinance, or Athia here, which is intended to improve the access to small medium business. I think the ratio of KLR to total microcredit has increased substantially during the period that we can observe. Again, I think there are still many challenges. The people, I think there's a tendency that people prefer to receive credit offered directly by the bank rather than through the government program. Although the credit, I think, so credit for cooperative or foundation programs remains popular for small business, including for farmers in rural areas. And then maybe because the possible reason is like maybe this is being guaranteed by the government. Still, a bank has to adopt the guarantee for this year, and maybe also because there's some factors of the process. Then after like talking about like some government policies to eradicate poverty reduction, which is I think there was a shift as well rather than focusing on the universal program that improved everyone's welfare prior to the crisis or prior to the centralization to be more about social assistance. This is why I say this one. When I presented the preliminary result in the social working party of social policy meeting last year, they have a discussion about how much actually we spend in terms of this health expenditure, social assistance, and then our expenditure actually from Indonesia is 2.5% of GDP, which is smaller compared to neighboring countries, and then the social assistance in Indonesia is 0.5% of GDP. If you compare to OECD countries of 96%, or average developing countries 1% of GDP. And but then low spending, yes, because we low spending, but also we also moderate to having low revenue because if for example, if you look at our tax rate, so our tax revenue compared to GDP is only 12%. In comparison to other emerging economies, like Brazil is 60%, Russia is 7%, South Africa is 26%. So I just like put a question here, over the discussion whether low spending actually represent the low revenue that we have. So I think that's probably will conclude my presentation. And today's one just to summarize. So as we see from the discussion, decentralization has brought significant changes in Indonesia, not only political structure, but also economic and social development applications. And then we see that there are some good things, there are some challenges in terms of poverty. We see that the trend of poverty actually declining at the time, but inequality actually rising. Again, regional disparities has been a major issue, not only in terms of regional disparities if we look at the provinces, but also within district. If we look at the centralization, it's actually focused on the district level analysis. And the new estimates of the global assets of poverty and inequality assets of poverty suggests that rising inequality has an impact and has been strengthening the offsetting positive benefit of consumption growth on poverty. So, what are the lessons of poverty? I guess this, I just put like 5 points here. Probably because like some of the policies, although like for the poverty itself, like for example, social system is like really still, under the I think this is but the decentralization is focused on the local level. So if we have state some policies and which is still like being decided at the national level, but yet to probably respond flexibly to the local needs. So and then developing integrated policy programs to strengthen the links between education, like as the interest and human capital of the organization, and maybe industrial zones. I haven't actually touched this part in this presentation, but in the report I mentioned about the MT3DI, about the development of the economic corridor framework of the which is trying to to put strength into region as the to bring the potential, the best potential capacity of each region or each economic corridor framework. If you can have the link between this economic corridor, which is different from one region to another region, and then the link to have to link this with what kind of education actually needed into promoting the success of that particular region. Because in the previous slide, we also talk about the skill mismatch, low absorption in terms of job applicants in the formal sector. So maybe if there are room for development, try to link to education and the economic corridors that are really helpful. And then improving the system of distribution of social assistance. There's something there's the investment to improve the full access to basic infrastructure. And to improving the system of distribution, then I guess we need to also improve the quality of information. We need to improve the quality of the base, and then who should get part of the social assistance really crucial. I think I would like to be really interested to hear from the audience what is the update into this PPLS, the data program for human social, whether it has been utilized yet to improve the problem in terms of targeting. And I think efforts should also to continue to secure a larger and more stable stream of revenue from taxation. We have really low tax compliance. If we can actually bring in measures to deal with the problem and try to improve the tax compliance, I think that would be really helpful. I think that's all our presentation today, and thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Ina, for a comprehensive review of what's going on with poverty and equality in Indonesia. I think the story is that Indonesia experienced an increase in income and high industrial poverty, but because of equality increase like other countries, the power of the increase in income and reducing poverty become less than otherwise it should be. But if we relate to my presentation earlier, there are still some questions that we need to find the answer, like what's the role of technological change in the inequality in this, and also what's the role of education expansion in reducing the inequality out that will be raised later during the discussion. Now we'll move to the second session with discussion. With the arrival of Ibu Alatas, we now have a complete discussion. Ibu Vivi is a senior economist and corporate living leader at the World Bank office in Jakarta. I think we'll follow the schedule here. We will have a discussion from Ibu Vivi first, then Jan second, and Athia third. Each of you will have 10 to 15 minutes. Time is yours, so maybe Ibu Vivi you can start.
Thank you, Asep. Thank you, Mira and Micheal, for a very interesting presentation. I'm really glad to see discussions and papers more on poverty. Previously, like almost like all the papers, it's just about poverty. More and more we see like discussion, policy dialogue on equality. It is indeed a complex issue, and it really needs a lot of us to work together to really understand better what not only in terms of providing diagnostics of the drivers, but on the specific translated into actions. And I think that the most difficult one that I found is that really what are the difference when we talk about actions on poverty versus actions on inequality? Because a lot of the time the tendency is talking about the same things. If we if you're talking poverty, talking on inequality, it's coming back to the same kind of like prescriptions. But I think that there are differences about the problem of inequality and the problem of poverty. But let me try to put up some comments and input or even some frustration from my part in terms of doing the same things on trying to do studies on inequality. First, on when Micheal, you did a lot of cross-country comparisons. The difficulty that I found, but I don't know, maybe you've already have some ways to address that. A lot of these countries have different sets of some use income, some use consumption. Whether when they use the same income, the questionnaires that behind that is totally different. It's almost like really not only comparing apple and orange, it's comparing durian and kesemak. It's very different type of fruits, so which make us really difficult to have conclusions to what extent the results is really coming from what we see, or is it because of the difference of way of computing that. The other part is the measurement errors of when we talk about poverty, even though we know that could be some measurement error, because of the left-hand side of the per capita consumption and the poverty line, it's usually coming from the same data. We are not really that. We are still can see. It's still okay. It's still possibly like the underestimation issues will not affect too much of our conclusion. But here, just to give you an examples of Indonesia situations. If we look from Susunas, just look like the upper, like the 1% of Susunas is way below the people that we know have all this buying the Louis Vuitton, or even like at the premium bank holder of all this Mandiri, BCA, that have like some limits which is very, very high. So a lot of the times, even when we talk about poverty, inequality in Indonesia is rising up to 0.41, a lot of these premium banking owners are not there. And I don't know to what extent do we see a similar measurement error in other things. Especially in Indonesia, if we compare the Susunas data with the national account data, the total consumption from Susunas is just only 0.40 of the consumption that you get from the national account data, the household consumption. Of course, you will not expect that it will be exactly the same, and I'm not expecting that national account is a better estimate of the consumptions than household data, but 0.40 is very small.
And it might not be the same in other countries. The degree of measurement error might not be the same in each of these countries. The other part is that talking about inequality, it's poverty. We could talk about poverty. All poverties are bad. But inequality, you cannot really say that all inequalities are bad. There are certain parts, of course, efforts needs to be rewarded. But unequal opportunity or getting like some increase of growth because of like some corruption, connections, nepotism, that's the bad part of like inequality. I think there is a need to really look at inequality not only just as a disease overall. Like there are certain part of inequality is because of, as you mentioned, like the change of in the technology and etc. But we need to dig deeper on that. For example, on this unequal opportunity, like the things about Indonesia, why we should care about inequality is three things: the rising of inequality, the underestimations, because even the 0.41, and this is a consumption inequality, and usually consumption inequality is like lower than income inequality. And then, but it's also underestimation. The underestimation also clear if you compare the number of motorcycles owners from Susunas with the number of motorcycle owners from the registry. It's 50%. Susunas only have 50%. Of course, there are some recall error, etc. But 50% is a huge number. The other one on this equal opportunity part, we also needs to be concerned about the rising of inequality, because the rising of inequality that explained by unequal opportunity is also increasing. Our study indicates that around 30% of the increase of inequality is because of the unequal opportunities. On factors that a child cannot really do anything, like where they were born, the education of their parents, etc., those kind of things, or the gender. That's like we need to address those kind of types of inequality because it's unfair. However, I think that this is a really fantastic work in terms of really trying to do understanding more and giving a better ammunition of really thinking about the debates on what needs to be done on equality. What I really would like to see more, Michael, is the methodology behind trying to see what is the drivers of change. As I mentioned, that you mentioned about the skill bias technology changes. I really would like to know more about why. The other part that I would like to see more is to what extent the roles of shocks and the inability to cope with shocks